All right. Welcome. This is the first professional practice event of the semester, which I am very excited about. My name's Alonso Pantoja. I use he, they pronouns. And let's get started. So I'm going to start with a visual description of myself, in case if we have anyone with low vision participating tonight. I am a brown man with glasses and dark hair, sitting in a home studio space. Now, before I introduce our speakers and begin this event, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the land we are occupying in Minneapolis is unceded territory, the ancestral homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. Gathering here, we pay our respects to the elders, both past and present. We acknowledge the great harm that colonialism brought to these lands, in particular the erasure of both Indigenous and African identities, not only under slavery, but via racist law that have segregated all people. We honor those who have lived and do live now at these intersections of identity and experience. And if you'd like to learn more, feel free to take a screenshot of this. I'll pause here for a second. Here we go. This event is sponsored by the MCAD MFA program, which is a community of makers, thinkers, researchers, and creative professionals working in a mentor-based interdisciplinary environment. And again, if you'd like to learn more, you can visit MCAD-MFA.com. Just a few notes. Your audio video will be muted for this webinar. If you experience any technical difficulties, please email us at av_support@mcad.edu. Please feel free to leave a question in the chat and we will select from the submissions after our speakers have presented. A recording of this webinar will be made available to MCAD students after the event. Just a few thank yous out of the way here. A huge thank to Kylie Van Note, Nikki Motokellam, and then our course, Pearl, who is our AV support for tonight's event. I also just briefly want to mention next month's professional practice. So we'll be conferencing, conventions, book fairs. So same time, February 23rd, 6 to 9 p.m. Central Time. Free, but registration is required. And then you can visit the link on the bottom. So I'll wait here if you want to take a screenshot. Great. And so for tonight, we have our event titled The Art of Collaboration. Now, before I begin, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. Alexander MacAlpine is a multimedia artist and collaborator, specializing in soundtrack development and audio editing for film. He has spent the last few years traveling for work after graduating from Nebraska Wesleyan University with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Acting. And then our second guest is Eric Butler, is a moving image artist who received his BFA in acting from Nebraska Wesleyan University and is currently pursuing an MFA at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, whose work has been screened nationally and internationally. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to them. and hear what they have to share, followed by Q&A. So Eric, if you want to take it away.
Hello, I'm Eric. I am a white man with very, very short hair, a beard, who's wearing headphones, a gray collared shirt, and dark blue sweater. And my background is a very bland wall. So let's learn about the art of collaboration. Collaboration, the art of it. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be defining a long-term collaboration. We're going to be looking at famous examples of long-term collaborations and what we can learn from those. Third, we're going to be looking at mine and Alexander's story and what we can learn from our mistakes, our mishaps, and our successes. Number 4, we're going to be applying the collaboration to your work, making it work for you and how to do so. And then finally, we will end with a Q&A. So long-term collaboration. What do I mean by that? I basically mean dating. Alexander, do you have something to say about that?
Spot on, nailed it. In all of our time, it has proved to be very much about emotional relationships between us as much as it is about the work. Eric just added that little point yesterday after we had kind of talked through it all, and I thought he really hit the nail on the head with that one. Yeah.
And Alexander, could you do a visual description?
Yeah, for sure. I'm Alexander MacAlpine. Visually, I'm a tall white man. I've got some kind of coiffed hair, a beard, white background, blue eyes. I've got a shirt on that's a corduroy paisley. It's blue, purple, and let's see, a little bit of green in there. Yeah.
Excellent. So when I say dating, I don't mean like only slightly, I do mean it quite seriously. You have to meet a lot of people to know who is kind of the people that you really want to collaborate with. You know, after one date, you might know that you don't want to go on a second date, but it might take a lot of dates. And in this analogy, I'm talking about projects. You know, after the first project, you may be like, you know what, this is not beneficial for either of us, and we should just go our own separate ways. And that's okay. That's honesty, and we'll get to that later. But it's very important to come to collaboration, especially if you're looking for a longer term collaboration, to realize that I think people only get a handful of opportunities like that in their life. And it's not every day. And I also want to clarify a long-term collaboration versus a short-term collaboration, especially in the context of art. If you look up techniques for collaboration, it's often in a corporate setting. And while that's very important, I think that also doesn't apply very well to an artistic sensibility, because like Alexander said, there's a lot more emotional baggage, I think, that is just in the room with you as you're working. So that's super important to realize. And sometimes you are just going to work with people on a one project basis. A lot of times that's what you're going to be doing if you work in a very collaborative medium. So famous duos, Ozu and Hara. So this is a super interesting duo that I really wanted to bring up, because both had super prolific careers before working with each other. And this is back in pre-World War II and post-World War II Japan, where the studio system was still very much alive, both of which worked for the same studio. However, despite their prolific careers, both of them, they're both really known for the work that they made with each other. And I don't want to speculate too much on their relationship, but they worked on movies together for 12 years and it stopped because Ozu died. They made a few movies, Ozu made one movie without Hara at the end of his life, and Hara made, I think, 2 or 3, but she quit acting the year that Ozu died. And like I said, I could very much speculate that that's a lot of context that could lead to thinking about certain things, that maybe they had a romantic relationship, or maybe they really felt that their work communicated together really well. But that's kind of not my place to say. So I'll leave it there.
Famous duos part 2. This is one of my all-time favorite duos. Paul Thomas Anderson, the director, and Johnny Greenwood, the composer, and also you might know him as the guitarist from Radiohead. They have had a working relationship with each other since 2007. I believe they began with Paul Thomas Anderson's adapted screenplay of There Will Be Blood. Since 2007, they've worked together almost exclusively, almost without exception. I think he's done There Will Be Blood, The Master, Licorice Pizza, Inherent Vice, one other movie I'm not thinking of. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, that Pete Anderson is quoted as saying that his working relationship with Johnny Greenwood is, as you can see there, it's one of the great joys of my life working with him, he says. And I think that really hits at the heart of what we're talking about, because it's really, when you peel everything else away, it's almost less about the work as much as it is about the relationship that you foster just through the medium of the work. And so I thought that was very telling, that P.T. Anderson had said something as vulnerable and specific as it's one of the greatest joys of his life was working with this person. And look at them together. I mean, she's, is charming and introspective and everything as can be there. And throughout their working together, I mean, they just click. I don't know how they speak to each other, how they talk to each other while they're working, but they clearly have some very similar ideas about what it is to make art and how to effectively do that. And for that reason, I think they're one of the greatest duos in modern film history.
Thank you. Now the third and final, deeper look into famous duos is this infamous one, Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski. There's a movie about their working relationship called My Best Fiend, and you can imagine how bad the relationship has to be to get to that point. Like my notes say, Herzog infamously threatened to shoot Kinski to keep him from leaving the production. A little bit more background on that. The production was going very poorly, and Kinski was the lead actor, and they were, I can't remember what country they were in, but they were very, very far from any sort of anything. They were like out way deep in the forest, and I got a sense that Herzog probably had his whole life into that movie. And Klaus Kinski is absolutely a wild dude if you look him up. I can't really say much about his character, anything much good, but he is a very good actor. When you get someone like Herzog, who's equally as wild, just in a different way, to reel him in and give him something good to work with. Obviously, this is not a good working relationship, and you should not be threatening each other to not leave projects. with guns, or I think there's one picture with Klaus Kinski jokingly holding up a machete to Werner Herzog's neck. So yeah, this is an absolutely wild duo, and you know, they made it work for them and they made a few good projects, but please don't do this to yourself. No, no project I think is worth this. So here's a few additional ones that I wanted to include. Spike Lee and Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. Now, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee were partners and they often performed together. They were both actors, but they were also both activists in the 20th century. And it really just makes sense that Spike Lee would gravitate towards them. Not only the fact that both of them are very talented, but the fact that both of their ideologies align and it all comes together to make projects that really speak to them on a grander level than just, oh, I like these things. Like they have a lot of things to say about societal issues, especially race in America. And the next one is Steina and Woody Vesolka. They are also partners. They started The Kitchen, which is still going in New York City today. And they were one of the pioneers for video art back in the late 60s and early 70s. And then eventually they stopped collaborating, which I think is important to say, because this doesn't have to last forever until you die. These are things that like, you can just decide like, hey, we had a good several years, we built a lot together, but now we've got separate interests. And that is like definitely a sign of like growth and maturity. The next one is Kelly Reichardt and Michelle Williams. I bring these two up because Kelly was quoted saying that Michelle is great to work with because Kelly doesn't know what Michelle is going to do on set. And even that one thing speaks to Kelly on such a deep level that she wants to have her on set. And that works for her and they make great work. And then of course, this famous duo, Basquiat and Warhol. This one was actually not that long term. It was only a few years and it ended. I'm not sure if this is conjecture, if this has been, if this is factual, but I read that they ended their relationship after a very poor show, very poorly received show. And that makes me think that since it lasted only a few years and it ended so easily, that maybe there was some business reasons for them to be together. You know, Andy Warhol was aligning himself with the new generation of young artists, and Basquiat has this star artist under their wing, and they obviously had great respect for each other. I think that's very easy to say, but that doesn't mean that they're right to work with each other. And now this duo, us. This is me and Alexander at our first film festival.
That's
And
right. Not much has changed. I mean, we look, Eric, your hair is a little shorter. You look basically the same. I still got the Paisley thing going on, you know, it's match made in heaven. Yeah, well, after all those famous duos, let's delve into hopefully the making of a new famous duo. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Eric and I met and some of the context that's come to form our working relationship. I would say now our relationship is based, you know, 70 to 80% on working on projects and art, but it definitely didn't start that way. We went to college together, as you probably noticed in Alonzo's description. And I think Eric transferred to Nebraska Wesleyan, which had a great theater program at the time. I think he transferred there in 2015 or 2016. And there was probably a year or more where I don't think Eric and I ever really had much contact with each other, other than a couple classes here and there. So we really didn't know anything about each other. We just see each other every day in class, and I say, "Oh, that Eric kid is, kind of interesting. He seems like a cool chap." And then in senior year, we decided to move into a house together via a couple other mutual friends of ours. And that might not seem that interesting, but I think when I think about it now, I think it was so important because it was really the time where we were able to have these long arching grand conversations about art and what we thought about it, frustrations with it, all this and all that, the thing that artists talk about. And what that did over that year is it helped establish for us sort of an agreed upon, a common groundwork in terms of our philosophical, ideological ideas about what art should be. So we had all this research that we had done before we even considered working on something together. And after that, I think a couple of our other friends and I were going to move to Minneapolis, and they were a couple. So I kind of felt like I was like third wheeling a little bit. So I got in touch with Eric, and I thought, oh, it'd be great if we had four of us up there, just kind of working. And I think he thought about it for a while, decided to move up there with us. And we didn't have a great time that year. Our living circumstances just weren't ideal. I think we were feeling a little bit alienated for a number of reasons. And Eric and I just started kind of taking walks all the time. We just walk around Minneapolis, walk around Lake of the Isles, Lake Calhoun, well, former Lake Calhoun. I forget the name of it now. I should be up on that. But yeah, so we spent all this time walking, and really out of the dissatisfaction with our environment at home, we just started to kind of mull around on these projects. And I remember that Eric at the time, as well as myself, were kind of obsessed with this idea of nostalgia, and especially nostalgia for a place that you've never been, or circumstances that you've never been a part of. And that came to form point number 2, which was our first real project together, Perennial. And basically what we did with that is we went back to my hometown, a town of 2,000 people, and we thought, this is a place that people should see. And so we decided to do that. And I think what was interesting about how we approached that piece is that we just let the circumstances totally inform the vision for what we were doing. We didn't come in and try and project our own ideas of what this film should be on top of it. We really just let all of this footage that we were gathering write the story for us. And in doing that, we really developed a language. We knew that we shared a lot of similar ideas in terms of ideology. Now we're just kind of digging a little bit, and we're meshing. We're throwing ideas out there, seeing what they like, what they don't like. But it was a total freeform experiment. And that led to Dysphoria, which was basically our first time making something that was, I guess, what I would describe as from the outside in. Like, Eric had a vision that we then tried to make something to fit that vision. And we were working remotely, which was difficult because so much of our work with Perennial was just hanging out in a spot for 2 months and just going out and filming cool stuff, So after that, we kind of started to form this more rigid way of working with each other. And that swung into Now Breathe, Now Don't, which is a project that I conceived and kind of pitched to Eric. And that was working remotely in the opposite way, something that I had conceived, a vision that was semi-rigid. And I pitched that to Eric, and Eric was able to come up with some visuals that were able to fit with that really well, I think. And so we've had, Perennial, overarching, sort of no rules. And then we kind of seep into the rules of Now Breathe, Now Don't, and Dysphoria. And recently we've been working on Pareidolia. And that is, I would say, almost full circle from Perennial. It's complete vision and complete non-vision at the same time. It's the first time that Eric has passed something along to me and just been like, do it, just go do it. Whatever you do. We have years of experience working with each other. I trust you to just do it. And that's what we've done. and we still throw ideas back and forth, but for the most part, we've really hit our stride in terms of just understanding what the other person is going for. And I think that is at the start of all of these relationships that we've just been talking about. Really just relying on trust and honesty and a common language, a common currency, I would say, a currency of ideas and compensation and that sort of thing. So that's basically the story of Eric and myself. And that leads us into a few of the next slides. What do we have? Yeah, applying some collaboration to your own practice.
Mm-hmm. So 3 rules that after going through this and then being really interested in those famous duos, these are kind of what I came away with, was respect, honesty, and compensation. Those are kind of like the things that need to be in a productive, collaborative relationship. And the funny thing, no matter how bad the Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski working collaboration was, they still hit all 3 of these, right? And that's a really big thing. Respect, obviously, that I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory in that you're not really going to work with someone if their work doesn't inspire you, right? If they don't get you thinking in different ways, then what you're going to make isn't going to be any different. And then there's no real reason to pursue working together. But I think these next 2 are much more interesting. I think honesty is in balance with respect, because I think sometimes you can have a little bit too much respect or maybe like reverence for the other person, and you're not willing to say, hey, this doesn't work. This does not work at all. And we're going to work really hard together to fix it, or to at least cover it up if you can't fix it. And you really have to be honest with each other when you do that, right? But you also have to be respectful. You can't come into the thing saying, oh man, I just looked at your painting and it's so bad we can't do anything with this. That's just not a way to start. Or even if you've been working together for 20 years, I don't think that's a good place to start with in a project. And then number 3 is a culmination of both. You have to respect someone to pay them, but you also have to be honest with how much you can pay. And this is the thing about compensation. Me and Alexander do financially help each other. We make sure either of us get paid, usually, whether it's substantial or just a token of appreciation, which that's what it usually is, to be fair. But Alexander, do you want to say what our compensation is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the most important things of a young working relationship. Most of the time, I don't know if it's fair or safe to assume, I think so, that a lot of artists starting out with a vision of what you want to be doing one day, it's pretty safe to say that a lot of time that's not making you a lot of money right off the bat, right at the beginning of your career. And that's great. That's all part of a larger through line. But what having a working relationship with Eric has allowed us to do is to have our own currency in a way, and our own form of compensation, which is not always financial. More often than not, it's not financial, because we understand that those right now are not the strengths that we have. What we have are a set of skills, and what everybody probably listening to this has is a set of skills that you can lend to people. I have skills when it comes to music, audio design, and Eric needs that for his films, and he has skills in terms of the visual side of things that I need for a lot of things that I'm working on. And so it's a perfect currency for us. Really, we're able to just kind of go back and forth with these different things, even when it just comes to ideas. You say, hey, I need Eric, the other night you were working on something, you're like, hey, I need 3 hours of like a windy, snowy night. I'm like, okay, how do you make the absence of sound, like but that's what we do. We go back and forth with that sort of thing, and I think that's really a cornerstone of our working relationship. And it's something that leads us to the next project. You say, oh man, I can't quite pay you for this one, but like, I'll get you back. And that gets us excited about what's coming up next. I think that to me is one of the favorite parts of working with Eric consistently, is just knowing that there's going to be another project around the corner. I love it. I think it's great.
And I think this is
better than money. Yeah.
I think this is like the where what everyone here can take away from this is that you can find your own compensation, but there has to be a reciprocal receiving and giving is the main point to take away from that.
Yeah. And on Eric, if you could go back for just 1 second, I want to touch on honesty there. In the sense that it ties back into what you were talking about with dating. It's really the component. I know that's, it's really a component of any good relationship is honesty. You just have to have it. It never quite feels good initially, or it can be kind of scary to like, get there. But once you do start being honest with people, not only about how you relate to each other, but about the work, then it really becomes fruitful. A lot of times you might feel like, oh, like I don't really want to bring this up. It's going to be a little bit like weird, and I don't want to offend them. But once you do, and you find out, oh, that person is really just interested in making something good, therefore they're not offended by ideas that are going to bring this project forward, then it really becomes fun, is because you can just let it rip. You can be as honest as you want to be, and it's all for the project. Just as it's all for the relationship in a romantic circumstance. I just wanted to relate that back to the dating thing that you had said. That's what I got.
Thanks for throwing that in there.
Yeah.
So now pros and cons to applying a collaboration to your practice, whatever medium that may be. The pros are built-in critique. It's so hard to get someone both who understands what you're going for on an intimate level to get honest feedback, and to also not just get either bad solutions or no solutions at all. Like, how many times have you heard, oh, that's really good, and then nothing else? Or like, oh man, this thing doesn't quite work for me, and then nothing else. Or they say it doesn't work for me, but you can fix it like this. And maybe that's a fix for someone else, but that doesn't at all align with your vision or your style or anything like that. But to have all of this good critique come in is super useful throughout the process. The second one is distribution of work. That's just pretty self-explanatory that, hey, I can hand this off to you and you can do this thing. Or like, oh, if we like kind of, rather than trying to do everything yourself, you just have more people spread out the work. Third is it's a lot of fun, especially if it's a good working relationship. Making is such a fun thing to do. And when you can be free with another person while making, it just takes it to the next level, right? You can be sculpting with a drummer and, a few hours go by and you're like, oh crap, we're out of time. And that's a shared experience. And I don't think you can replace shared experience with much else. The fourth one is a little bit of a business idea, that a wider network helps your work get out there. Imagine you make a work by yourself, and then the only people you can really show are people who are close to you, like colleagues, friends, family, and then that's your circle. If you just add one more person, that doubles your circle, right? They have a ton of family, ton of friends, ton of colleagues that you have never met before, who may like what you two come up with, right? It's just increasing your odds of success.
Well, one thing I love about that, Eric, not to interrupt, but to tag on to that, is that it's a filter too. When you have somebody that, like, we've put in the work, and I'm sure all these duos throughout history have put in the work of understanding that we're on the same ideological page when it comes to work. It's a filter for all these people that you're networking with. You're not networking one person at a time, trying to figure out, are we thinking of things the same way? They've already, in a sense, passed the test because they're associating with somebody that you respect so highly. And in that sense, it's almost like exponential. It goes. This person knows 6 people that, in a way, agree with your vision of what it means to bring art into the world. And in that sense, it's like, why wouldn't you collaborate with everyone? You can make things on your own even, but bring them to this social setting where that networking is just going to it's just going to click. That's something I can definitely do a better job of, for sure. We probably all could, but I think that right there, the wider network, is a fun part of it that's really efficient too, as well as just being good business wise,
Mm-hmm. And then the final thing, efficiency. This kind of goes back to the distribution of work, but the difference is, if you get stuck on something, a problem, you have someone else there that is thinking in a totally different way that may be able to solve your problem in an hour rather than 5 days. And that is so crazy how quickly you can go through something and get so much work done when you have solutions faster, or when you can get to something like more immediately. So yeah. Cons, compensation, it's difficult. It's a very difficult thing to compensate. And as I see it, it's something that you can't really neglect. You have to figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, then maybe it just is not for that project. And that just comes with what the other person or other people that you're working with agree upon, right? But it's always a conversation that you have to have. And even if they accept no pay, but you're not willing to do it, to make them do it for no pay, then it's just not going to work out. And that's a big problem to have to deal with and negotiate. Or it's a con, not necessarily a problem. Second in the cons is scheduling. You can wake up at 3 a.m. and you can get to work, right? You have something hit you while you were asleep, and then you can get going. But you can't do that with another person. You can jot some stuff down, but you're not going to have the immediacy of, oh crap, like we can work together and we need to work together to get this thing done. And that can sometimes ruin that agency that you have in that moment. And then the third thing is right to work with, wrong for the project. Sometimes the other person's skills is just not applicable to the project that you're doing. Like, that's just a fact that you have to accept. I cannot make a music video for Alexander for everything that he has, right? I do not always have the resources or always have the skills for like a vision that he might have. And then he would need to go with someone else, and vice versa. Sometimes Alexander does not think in the musical style that I'm thinking of, and he wouldn't be able to create it as good as someone else. And Alexander, you said something really good about this before, that you both want good work, and that's all that matters, right? That like, I would love for Alexander, like if he found another director to make like a music video that was like something I couldn't do for whatever reason, then that's good. That's awesome, right? Because we just want good work for each other. And that's like super important to that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what's nice about it not having started as a financial relationship, because when you decide to like score something on your own, I'm not like, oh shoot, I don't get to get paid for that. You know, it's not a job in essence. It's more of an opportunity to grow at this point, you know, in time. And so when you form your relationship based on those standards, you just want the other person to do really well, and that means you're going to do better. And with that, yeah, like having the same sense of standards and stuff, super important. And therefore we're just not upset when the other person decides to do something. Like why would you be? And I don't know that a lot of people are, but I think it's important to know that you probably shouldn't be possessive of other people that you're working with. Like, you're not mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point you made there.
I think it's just important, like, especially like the emotional like component that you
Yeah.
do, like it's back to dating, you know. So techniques that you can use to make your collaboration a little bit easier and that supports both of you is to model behavior. I have a real quick story about this one. I was in a show, Romeo and Juliet, and the first rehearsal, the director said, "I do not like this show very much." That's not a good that's not good behavior to model, because as soon as you say that, everyone loses like agency, and they lose like interest, like, oh no, and doubt the whole thing. You've destroyed your trust with the people that you're going to work with. So, and this applies not only to attitude, but also to like schedule. If you have to be clear about what you want. Do you want the schedule to be like, oh, loosey goosey, like I'm going to text you in 3 weeks and have this brilliant idea, and then we can work 12 hours on Sunday, and then we don't hear each other from a week? Or do you want like a regimented check-in or anything like that? That's just something you have to be clear about, and then to stick to it if you want the other person to also stick to it. The second is to push each other's comfort zone. That's how growth happens. And growth is kind of one of the key components of why you would do this, is that the other person is going to push you, and you're going to have to accept being pushed as well. And that goes along with honesty, right? Being honest with the other person and them being honest to you. Staying engaged, I think this is simple, but also super, super important, is that it's not a work email, right? Like you should be checking in, like saying like, hey, how's your life going? You know, if you haven't talked in a little bit, and just be friendly. And you should use multiple forms of communication. If you're just sending emails, it becomes like a work relationship, like a purely a work relationship. But like if you get to email and then, oh, I'll send you a meme and I'll text you this meme, or in like you meet up and you go hang out and you just talk, that I think builds a much stronger bond, and continues that wavelength. Fourth is taking accountability. That's another thing, not just being honest with the other person, but being honest with yourself, that like, oh man, I really screwed up, right? And that's respecting the other person as well, especially if they can see it. You just have to be accountable of what you can do and what you can't do, and what you've done. And then finally, being a good listener. I know this is a pretty basic, every relationship type of deal, but it's a hard one, right? It's a hard thing to master. And some good techniques are clarifying what the other person said. It's reflecting on what the other person said. And that can be a 10-second reflection. That can be a day-long reflection. Like, hey, I'll get back to you on that note. That kind of hit a certain place. But applying those techniques to be a good listener is super beneficial. And then how to get started. Being open. Like you have to be open to meet new people and to share ideas with people. And like Alexander said, that's super hard, you know, because sometimes you like craft this stuff and you've been thinking about it, and then someone says no. Well, now you feel like dejected or like something, but that no might be coming from anywhere. You can still be open with that person, and years down the line, that might be, you know, your working relationship. And that includes putting yourself out there, like taking workshops, being around other people. If you're in your basement, you're not going to meet other people to collaborate with. And that's just a fact. And then the third one, you have to be good to work with. Coming from the theater, I've heard this so many times, but people would rather work with someone who is not as good, but is reliable and honest and just a good person and good to work with than the most brilliant person in the world. And they don't show up on time. And you don't know if they're going to show up. Or when they do show up, they bring something that wasn't what you were expecting, or someone who doesn't communicate. Like, all those things are big turnoffs when you're thinking 10 years, you know? So that is something that you can do to help your chances of finding these rare opportunities. And then I'll just review really quickly important takeaways. Long-term reciprocal relationships are hugely beneficial for everyone involved, especially if you follow the 3 rules. Every collaborative relationship is going to look different. If it works, it works. Don't threaten to kill each other, but if it works for you and you're both happy, that's the way to go. The third is, over a long period of time, the relationship and the work will require different things from everyone. Take this in stride. Be willing to grow with that person. And if you happen to grow away, that's part of the process. Respect, honesty, and compensation. Be the person you want to work with. Super important. And it may or may not happen for you, but it's worth looking for that opportunity. I know it's helped my work tremendously. And I would say anyone who's had this kind of relationship or done this kind of work would say the same thing. And Q&A.
Great, thank you so much. That was a very thorough presentation. I got a sneak peek beforehand, and I was like, there's a lot of good content, and the way that you both delivered it, I think, was really well thought out. So if there are any questions for either Eric or Alexander, feel free to place them in the chat, and I could read them out loud, or if you want to unmute yourself, that works too. While folks get questions in there, I just want to sort of touch on a few things that I was writing notes. I think honesty, I think that was a really good word for collaboration, because I think when I think of honesty, there's also a sense of comfort that comes with it, because in order for us to be honest with someone else, there has to be a level of comfort. Otherwise, how can we be honest? And that in itself is like a very good foundation for a collaborative relationship. So I guess my question leading into that is, could you speak a little bit about the level of vulnerability that you sort of have to like acknowledge or take on, whether that's individually or in a collaborative approach? And that's for either of you. I know that was vague.
Eric, I can start on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Eric and I have had a specific kind of training too, having been in the same BFA program when it comes to acting. I mean, as you probably know, acting is all about vulnerability and just being present and allowing yourself to be influenced by everything that's going on around you and all the circumstances of the text and the script, the set, whatever you're working with. And for Eric and I, that's been good. I feel like we've been able to harness a pretty steady level of vulnerability. You know, I don't think it ever goes too far that we're just like, you know, sobbing on the floor with each other. Not that that's a bad thing. If that's a part of your relationship, that's great. But it's always been, you know, I think we've struck an okay balance of being vulnerable with our ideas, but also allowing them to be progressive, like moving forward all the time. So I think any working relationship, even with yourself, requires you to be pretty vulnerable. I just really think that's the comfort zone thing Eric mentioned. If you're not riding that line, you're really not falling into any new territory. And I guess that's kind of what the whole thing is all about, is new territory. Eric, can you touch on that at all?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing up that acting. That's a pretty big component of that.
Many years ago.
The one thing I want to bring up is, you know, telling the story about how we, came to be. It took years of us talking and like just hanging out with each other to be that vulnerable. So that was a long process in and of itself. And I think that's super important to realize also, that you're not going to be knocking it out of the park on the first project. The first date's going to be awkward. It's always awkward. And the speed at which you progress from that awkwardness is really dependent on the 2 people, the 3 people, and more involved. And you should allow it to evolve. Like, you shouldn't be scared of it, and you shouldn't try to push it, because trying to push someone to be vulnerable is like the quickest way to get someone to shut down and to like, nope, why are you asking all this stuff? I just want to work on a project together, right? So yeah, it's really about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. It looks like there's a question from Alexis. Could you speak about how you deal with problems that arise in a collaborative practices? Maybe an example of how you dealt with uncertainty or failure and move forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. Eric, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you've had a more specific vision when it's come to all the projects that we've tackled, that I feel like I have dealt a little bit more with uncertainty in terms of, and Eric is very specific. He's a very thorough, very specific person to work with. And so there are times when I'll be creating something and I'm into it, and then I get done and I just like, clear my mind, and I'm like, oh, is Eric gonna like that? I'm like, oh shoot, like, was that good? Is that gonna fit into what Eric's doing? So I've dealt certainly with a lot of uncertainty in terms of processing what I think you're gonna think. But then when we get together, I always just make sure and make that clear. I'm like, hey, I did this, and I got to think about it. I'm not quite sure if it's what you're looking for. Please tell me what you think. Straight up, like, confront Eric with telling me exactly what's going to work for him. That's how I've gotten over dealing with those little problems. I just have to, it's the honesty thing again. I just have to like put it in his face. I'm just like, tell me what you think. That works for me. Eric?
Yeah. Being on the receiving end of that is like the whole point, right? Of working with someone, is someone saying like, oh, this doesn't work. Or like, oh man, I don't know if this is going to work. In terms of failure, I think that comes back to honesty as well. Like, you just got to take the L sometimes, that's, and you have to do it together, right? You just have to say, it's not the best work in the world. We did our best, but like, there were foundational things that were problem, or like, this thing just never came to be. And it is what it is, right? And as long as you're honest and willing to accept that, I think you can move on from it. But you can't think that like everything one person does or everything you do as a group is going to succeed, and you shouldn't really become a isolated an echo chamber for each other. Like, you shouldn't both stroke each other's ego. It's about removing yourself from your ego and helping the other person remove themselves from their ego as well.
Yeah, thanks, Alexis. That was a good question.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question from Ellen. You mentioned walking together, love it, as a way to get to a stronger collaboration. Are there other activities you recommend?
I recommend anything physical. I think physicality is really the best pathway to get to yourself. Like your reptile brain kind of like takes control. And to me, if you've walked for any distance, over like 3 or 4 miles, you start to realize that you lose all concept of time, and like the logical, like frontal temporal part of your brain just kind of like pieces out, and you're just left like in a world of like colors and stuff. And to me, anything physical like that, especially with another person, because we're not taught to be physical with other people. That's the thing, is like when you get physical with other people, it's funny. Like you just might, you're taking a walk, you're running, you're jumping around, you're doing whatever. To me, that's just the best way to get there and answer that question. Anything physical is going to get you there. Prolonged physicality, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I have nothing else to add to that. I remember us like moving like trees from like around your property or whatever,
Yeah.
like just moving them to piles, and it's one of those things. And
Yeah.
cutting wood for the fire.
One of those things. Just one of those things. Yep.
I agree with that. I mean, I have a whole discourse on like physical and touchness, but we'll hold that for a different.
Yeah.
There's a final question from Carrington. Imperiano, were you happy with your footage collection from day one, or did it take a while for the ball to get rolling as you explored small town Nebraska?
So
that one,
yeah, the process for Perennial was very weird, because we just came to it with an idea and maybe slightly a structure and like a feeling we wanted to explore, and then we just ran around and filmed stuff. And then in the process of like the filming and the talking and the making the music, it came together eventually. Right? Like it was a very I think that was probably the most process-based project I've ever worked on, because the project came out of the process.
Yeah. We really had no idea what we were doing. It was awesome.
I think
it was the best.
I think that is also kind of an important thing as well, that we were learning together and like teaching each other like things we didn't know. Like I was bringing like ASMR ideas to the score for Alexander, like, oh, like what if you try like doing these little things? And then Alexander like would give me like notes on the video and like the pacing. Even your dad got in on it, and I followed like one of his notes.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's kind of funny, like it's another thing. The process was almost a third character, a third creator for us, because like for instance, in the final, I think like 6-7 minutes of the film, we have like it gets dark, there's a lightning storm, there's the 4th of July, and then the final shot, there's like rain on the ground as we're leaving. Like all these things just kind of like happened, and they all fit and segued perfectly into each other. But we couldn't have written that. Like that was the weather. Like we filmed a tornado, and like that informed the last shot of the whole thing. And so it was really writing itself. Like it really was. It was there was a third person there, and we don't really know who they were. But yeah, thank you, Carrington. Thank you, Carrington Cooper. Yep.
Great. I think we're out of time, unfortunately. I mean, I would love to continue the conversation. And I think the idea of like exchanging knowledge and skills is such I think a prominent thing in collaboration and in general with human beings. So I just wanted to echo that. On that note, thank you so much, Eric and Alexander for your time and sharing this amazing presentation. And thank you all for joining us. Have a nice night. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Lonzo.
everyone.
Bye-bye.